all our decisions have always, the traditional approach is like all of your decisions are based around work, basically. Like you have to live in a specific place and do things a certain way because that's where your job is. And once you take that out of the equation, it opens everything up. So that's really what it's all about, I think.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast about getting past your borders. Physical, international, psychological, and living the life you want to live. My name is Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
Hey, Jonathan. How you doing?
Well, we going to talk about the weather again or some other bullshit?
Well, I mean, it's so great. I think people are probably getting tired of hearing how wonderful the weather is here.
Well, I know. And for some reason, I always introduce the weather because it was relevant to me when we were freezing our asses off a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But there's so much more.
We can talk about the great weather or the lack of traffic.
Lack of traffic is nice right now. I appreciate that. I'm going to be in L.A. in a month or so visiting my daughter. And,
oh, boy.
I will not be experiencing a lack of traffic there.
Yeah, right.
Yes. But what will be nice is maybe we can get our guest's take on San Miguel de Allende because she's been living here and she's here right now in studio. This is only... I think we've only done this a few times when we've actually had somebody in the studio here. Our guest is Amy Scott from Nomadtopia. In 2004, Amy Scott quit her job as an editor at a travel publishing company in the San Francisco Bay Area to embark on a trip around the world. As her trip came to an end after nearly 9 months of travel, she spent a week on the beach in Thailand trying to make sense of it all. And one thing was clear, this was not the end, but only the beginning. The first of many steps she would take toward creating her ideal life, her Nomadtopia. Determined to not go back to an office, Amy began working for herself as a book editor and writing coach at Nomad Editorial. In 2011, she founded Nomadtopia, a hub of information, inspiration, community, and support for anyone interested in creating a more flexible lifestyle. She has continued to run her businesses while living in a number of U.S. cities, road tripping in the U.S. and Canada, traveling to Asia and exploring Central and South America, especially Buenos Aires, Argentina, her home base since 2007, although you've been here a good long time. How long have you been? By the way, welcome Amy Scott to the Borderless Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So how long have you and your husband been here in San Miguel?
It's been about 4.5 months altogether.
Okay. And why here? Why did you come here?
Well, we had been kind of looking for a new place to go. We wanted to stay in this hemisphere. We were in Southeast Asia for quite a while in 2013 and 14. And we're kind of looking at the options in this area. I've always wanted to spend more time in Mexico. I love the food and feel like I know Mexico really well, and yet I'd never spent more than a week here. So we decided it was time for a new adventure in Mexico. My husband had never been here before. And San Miguel, I'm not sure how exactly, ended up on the short list. And then I actually connected with someone on Twitter who lives here and was talking it up, and it quickly shot to the top of the list.
So I'm just curious, I'm sure you went to several places in Mexico then? Or?
Actually, no, that was our plan. Oh. And instead we came here first and we've been here the whole time. That's kind of how it goes. Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, a lot of people end up here. So,
but I guess we should back up. I wanted to get your take on why you were in San Miguel here. So this all began something like 11 years ago. You quit your job. It was a typical corporate America thing, although as corporate America jobs go, I suppose working for a travel publishing company might have offered a lot of cool stuff. Yeah,
and being in the Bay Area helps also. Right. I never worked, I'm from the East Coast, but I never worked after, I never had a real job on the East Coast. So I was lucky in that respect to get all my work experience on the West Coast.
Yeah. Why? What's the difference between East and West Coast?
Well, I would just, some of the generalizations about, I think people in general on the West Coast, it's more casual, more laid back, more open-minded. Of course, that's a huge generalization, and not all of the West Coast is like that. And that doesn't mean none of the East Coast is like that. But yeah, I had an internship when I was in college. I went to school in D.C., Washington, D.C., and had an internship in college, and that was about as close as I got to, kind of the East Coast corporate thing. But I'm sure working in publishing in California versus New York is a very different beast.
No, I get you. So anyway, there came a time when you decided you didn't want to go back to that job, and you said you ended up on a beach somewhere trying to figure it all out. What was that like? How did you feel during that time?
Yeah. So I had, when I quit my job, it's funny, many times I had thought about going out on my own, working in publishing. I was surrounded by freelancers, but I was working in an office. And I often thought about, giving that a shot, but it always felt really scary and really daunting. And for some reason, quitting my job to travel didn't seem quite so scary. And I didn't know what I was going to do after that. I thought maybe I'll go back to San Francisco. Maybe I'll go back to the same industry, to the same job, even, who knows. And after being on the road for almost 9 months, I didn't want to, it's so easy to just kind of rush on to the next thing. And I really wanted to take a moment and really step back and think, okay, what has this experience been like? What have I gotten out of this? How does this inform what I'm going to do next? Instead of just, hopping on a plane and going home and it can, I'll kind of disappear in a second, as you kind of get back into your normal routine. So yeah, more than anything, I just wanted to have some time to process the whole experience and soak it in.
Right. And so you came up with, you called it Nomad Editorial. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the first business. And really it was, just a logical extension of my experience in publishing. And I went back to the States to start that business. And from day one with the intention that I'm just going to get this ramped up and then I'm on the road again.
And what was the purpose of Nomad Editorial?
It's editing services, so proofreading and editing, copy editing, and I've since added writing coaching as well. And I'm still doing that work.
So what about some of the kind of nuts and bolts of that? How long did it take for you to get that up and going? How did you, we can just start with that. How long did that take till you were, say, self-sustainable with the amount of income that you were making with that?
Yeah, so I was lucky in that I guess I maybe over budgeted a little bit, and I actually came back with money in the bank. So I had enough money to buy a laptop, get a place to live, kind of, tie myself over for a couple months as I kind of got things started. And because I started in an industry where I had experience and I had contacts, honestly, it was super easy.
That's great.
I just decided, I think I came back around the end of May, and I decided, okay, I'm officially in business August 1st. And I sent out emails to everybody I knew in publishing, now I'm freelancing, please hire me. I remember I got my first project on August 1st, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
So you really didn't have to do a whole lot of marketing or anything like that?
There have definitely been stretches over the years where I've had to do that. And also my business model, my clientele has shifted a lot over the years. I don't do any work anymore with publishing companies. Now, most of my clients are entrepreneurs and other, independent authors, most of whom are self-publishing or maybe, kind of finalizing their ideas and their content to put out a proposal. So as, I've made some shifts, there's definitely been a need to reach out to new audiences and connect with new people, but I've been really lucky. It's been mostly word of mouth.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good market, for somebody that wants to have like a location independent business, editor, publisher, or something like that. You think that, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going into that market now. Do you think it's still a good thing for someone to learn and try to set up their own business?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much more challenging it would be if you didn't have, some of the background and contacts that I had, but it's definitely a great kind of work to do to be location independent. That was, for me, it was a perfect fit. And really, the only thing I had to change when I actually left the U.S. is, and I think this is probably, it's been 10 years, some of this has probably changed. For proofreading, I actually used to get printouts, laid out pages of the manuscript on paper via FedEx or whatever, and I would mark them up and send them back. So obviously when I left the country, I had to say, I can't do that kind of work anymore. But now you can mark up PDFs and, there's all of this stuff. So it's been very, very rare that, my location has been an issue with that kind of work. It's like, as long as you can get online to send files and stuff, it's super easy.
So how would somebody, that maybe they didn't have a whole lot of experience in that field or any at all, how would you recommend that someone get started?
Well, it's definitely a good idea to get the basics of, I think a lot of people, actually, I'm mentoring someone right now who's at this point, and this is something that I'm thinking about opening up to more people. Because a lot of people have I've always noticed typos. I'm really good at spotting typos and this kind of stuff. And my friends always come to me for help, which is a great start. That's really important. But there's a lot of the nuts and bolts of there's, hyphens and N dashes and M dashes. Do you know what each one is for and when to use them? And those kinds of really mechanical things that I think can make a huge difference and make a difference in, the quality of the work that you put out there. So I think really studying up on that kind of stuff is really valuable. And I think there's a huge market now with, because so many people are self-publishing and also just so much content online. I also edit blogs and newsletters and all kinds of stuff, websites. So, it's, just like anything else, I think it's like getting started with whoever who's willing to give you a shot and just start to build, some testimonials and some references and go from there.
Just kind of studying up on grammar. I know kind of the go-to book on that is Elements of Style, right?
Yeah, although it's not, it's really short. It doesn't cover everything. Yeah. There's a book actually called The Copy Editor's Handbook, which is probably one of the most useful resources for all of that kind of grammatical and punctuation stuff. And also having a good style guide, getting familiar with the different style guides. I use primarily Chicago Manual of Style because that's kind of the gold standard for book publishing. But if you want to work in, newspapers or magazines, that's usually AP style. I've done some dissertations, that's APA style. So all of this documentation is out there, and it's just kind of, getting the resources you need.
Okay, so it's not just proofreading. I know that's how I look at it. That's what all my life friends, even to this day, people will send me stuff to proofread.
Yeah.
And I have that thing where it just leaps from the page. I see all the errors, but I don't know how to properly use hyphens or double hyphens or some of the things. I know that there are times that I use substitutes because I think it's the safest thing to do, but not the right thing to do, So you've got all of that, and you've got a business, and you can help people. So a person comes to you, maybe they've got a blog or a website or something like that, and they enter into a contract with you where you go over the things as they publish them and clean them up for them.
Yeah, so it depends. When it's that short content and stuff that's coming out regularly, we usually do. I'm kind of like on retainer, and so they can send me stuff, on a regular basis. And then for book projects, that's a lot lengthier process before anything's actually put out there. But yeah, I enjoy both of them.
Gotcha. Okay, so where did everything take you? You said you went back to the U.S. to start the business, so about 2007-ish.
2005.
2005, and you were in the Bay Area at that time?
No, actually, I moved to L.A.
L.A., okay, very good. Where were you living in L.A.?
In Glendale.
Glendale, okay, very good. And so that's when you got the business up and running. And then you're like, I can't stay here. So where was the first place you went after that?
Yeah, well, I knew I didn't want to stay in the U.S. I knew I didn't want to stay in L.A. either. I went there for a guy, and that didn't work out. Okay. So I was only in L.A. 9 months. Okay. And then I started a really long, slow road trip back to the East Coast, thinking maybe I would hang out there for a while until I was ready to go abroad. And got in a car accident on the way. Oh. That was an adventure.
Yeah.
Ended up totaling my car in the middle of Indiana and having to, get a rental car and move all my stuff. And anyway, I had to cut the road trip short. Got to my parents' house without a car and said, I think maybe I'll just stay here until I'm ready to leave. Is that cool? So I ended up staying with them in New Jersey for about 6 months. And then kind of hit my wall with that. I don't want to be here, but I'm not quite ready to go. I wanted some money in the bank. And I also wanted, to be feeling really solid with the income coming in. So I wasn't quite ready to leave. So I moved to Philadelphia for actually, I think I was in Philly about 6 months also. And then moved to Buenos Aires in 2007.
Right out to Buenos Aires. Did you meet anybody interesting in Buenos Aires?
Well, not right away. Or I should say, yes, they were all interesting people. But dating in Argentina was definitely an adventure. And it was the first time also since I quit my job really, and even before that I didn't have a plan for what was next. And I was like, well, I really like it here. I'm just not going to worry about what's next until I don't want to be here anymore. And so I stayed for about 2 years, and I was just starting to think, okay, I could really be anywhere. Do I still want to be here? And then I went out salsa dancing one night with some friends and met a really cute guy who is now my husband.
All right. So, what's his name?
Yeah, Roberto.
Yes. Well, felicidades.
Thank you.
All right. And how was your Spanish at that point?
Good enough. We mostly spoke Spanish. His English was not very good, and we mostly spoke Spanish when we first met. I was like, I guess I'll stick around and, see how this works out. And we got married in 2012.
Okay.
All right.
Again, well, congratulations on that.
Let's talk a little bit about Buenos Aires. You seem to really like it there. We were talking before the podcast. There's a few people that I've talked to the last week or two that are going there that really like it. So I've never been.
Yeah.
So maybe you could explain a little about it and who that might be good for.
Yeah. Well, when I first moved there, I was looking for a place I could go and work on my Spanish. And lower cost of living was definitely appealing. And also, I've always lived in big cities, or had up until that point, and wasn't really ready to, downsize, so to speak, to a smaller city or a smaller town. So for all of those things, it seemed like a good place to start. With that said, things have changed a lot in the last, almost 8 years. It'll be 8 years next month since I moved there. And inflation there is out of control.
Yeah, we've been hearing about that.
So prices are very different than they were when I moved there. The exchange rate has also kept pace to an extent. So that's made a big difference. So a beer used to be 9 pesos, a liter beer. It used to be 9 pesos. Now it's it depends where you go, 30 pesos, 40 pesos. But when I moved there, the exchange rate was also 3 to 1. And now it's 8 to 1. And there's the black market, or the blue dollar, which is actually, I've stopped keeping track. It was up to 13 or 14. So the blue was almost double the real exchange rate. So it really complicates matters. And
so you can't go back just yet because beer's too expensive? How important is beer to you?
Well, it's cheap here in San Miguel.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Borderless Podcast. Our guest is Amy Scott of Nomadtopia. We're talking about her path that has led her to San Miguel de Allende, although I'm told she is going to be headed back to Buenos Aires, which has been her primary home base since 2007. So it's been exciting so far. I want to talk, you've been other places since then, right? Where else have you explored?
Yeah, so for a while I was pretty much sticking to South America. I did one of the things actually I didn't mention, which is really good about Buenos Aires, is especially for people who don't have residency, 1-2 hour boat ride to Uruguay for a visa run. So that makes it super easy. It's very close to the border. Although, as those things are always changing too, sometimes they start to crack down and you start hearing people, get all nervous. But I lived there on a tourist visa for 5 years. So it's definitely doable. And I know people who are still there on tourist visas. Anyways, so then, after we got married in 2012, the plan had always been, the nice thing was I already had this perspective and I was already location independent. I knew what I wanted my life to look like. And so it was basically Roberto, if this sounds good to you, awesome. And if not, I totally understand. And he was totally on board from the beginning. And he has really, transferable skills, having worked in IT and graphic design. And so he's able to take all of that and work from anywhere as well. So in 2012, we actually did a 6-month road trip in the U.S. And and then went back to Argentina for a little bit, and then went to Southeast Asia for about 9 months.
Where's that? We're talking about Thailand?
Yeah, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and India.
And how did you find that?
It was great. I'd been there before to some of those places anyway. And obviously that was a whole new ball game for Roberto. But yeah, we really enjoyed it. We tend to travel pretty slowly because we are working at the same time. So like we spent 2 months in Chang Mai in Thailand, 2 months in Bali, 2 months in Langkawi, which is an island in Malaysia, with some, kind of moving around that. And yeah, it was great.
Great. There aren't too many Borderless podcasts in a row in which someone doesn't mention Chiang Mai. Uh-huh. And often it's several in a row. So it comes up all the time. What specifically was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, I had been there, I guess it must have been like 10 years ago on my around the world trip. I had spent a week or two there. And so I remembered really liking it. And it's definitely becoming kind of a hot spot for digital nomads and everything. So I was kind of curious to go back. And it was a really good experience. We enjoyed it there a lot. It was, it's pretty easy to live there. It's easy to find a place to stay. Again, well, this I think has changed. So it's been almost 2 years since we were there. And, I guess it's just been over a year. But I hear that they've been changing. Like I was going to say visa runs are easy, but I'm not sure that's totally true anymore. There's been some cracking down over there. But in terms of finding a place to stay, and there's co-working places there, which is really cool. And lots of people, looking for a place to kind of settle down a bit and work. And then, there's a lot going on. For me, we were just in 2 months, I felt that I really was feeling desperate to learn the language. And I felt like it was very, there's only, I think I've gotten spoiled being in South and Central America where I speak the language and I can talk to anybody, anywhere. It doesn't have to be, just educated people, just people in tourism, just students. And I felt really limited by that in Chiang Mai because I don't know the language. I know I can say 10 words, and it felt like it was harder to kind of, get into the local culture and connect with people without some of that. So if I were to spend more time there, I definitely would, I would take classes and start working on that.
Cool. All right. So we're talking with Amy Scott of Nomadtopia. In a moment, what we want to do is talk to her a little bit about her website, her blog, her podcast, which looks like it's right about as old as the Borderless podcast. Looks like you've got, 35 episodes right now, something like that?
Yeah, I think this week is 36.
Right. So we want to talk to her about that. And we also want to talk to her about her book entitled Destination Nomadtopia, Discover the Ideal Lifestyle for Your Nomadic Soul. But right now, we're going to take just a moment to give some attention to our sponsor. This week's Borderless Podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group. Today, the Condescending Group would like to have a conversation with you about the best uses of your money. Now, don't get them wrong. They advocate freedom of choice in all matters that they care about. But really, can you justify paying for that flat-screen TV when there are starving, uneducated children throughout the world? They don't think so. It's not that they want to tell you how to spend your own money. It's just that they want to tell you how to spend your own money. So the Condescending Group reminds you to make contributions to them instead. It's true that they don't do anything to feed starving children either, but the fact that they provide thousands of articles, YouTube videos, and events where people talk about starving children, and where many people can be heard shaming others over starving children, should make it obvious that your money is well spent. Combine that with the condescending get-togethers in which people are all at once posturing themselves morally, criticizing productive people, erupting into spontaneous beat poetry and yoga poses, not to mention drinking the latest trendy wine and talking at length about shitty art. Well, is it any wonder why unmotivated, unproductive people worldwide are choosing to put off spending daddy's money on that big screen and instead send their contributions to the one, the only, the Condescending Group. They care more than you. And we're back with our guest on the Borderless Podcast, Amy Scott of Nomadtopia. She talked to us about how she left her job in corporate America with a travel publishing company. She was on a 9-month travel tour, and she decided, I don't really want to stop this too much. ended up on a beach, sorted it all out, and it led her back to the U.S. for a while, back to Buenos Aires and all over the world. And so she has a company called Nomad Editorial, in which she helps people with editing projects, but she also has Nomadtopia, a website. Why don't we talk about that? What was the inspiration for creating it, and what is the purpose of it, Amy?
So I started, as we talked about, I started Nomad Editorial because it was just a kind of a no-brainer. I knew that it was work I could take anywhere. It was work I could start getting paid to do immediately because of my expertise and my contacts. And I enjoy editing, but it wasn't like I kind of was like, what's my purpose? What's my, passion? I just kind of did it because I'm like, let's make money, let's travel, let's go. So that's been great, and I still enjoy doing that. But I did get to a point a couple of years ago where I thought, what else do I have to contribute? And what is kind of my larger purpose, and how do I want to help people, and how do I want to spend my time? And all of this lifestyle stuff has been part of my life for so long, and I could talk about this stuff all day, all week. And so, that, seemed like a natural fit. And so I started the blog in 2011. And originally it was just a blog. I had the intention to, bring some, to monetize it in some way at some point, but I didn't know what that would be. And since then, I've started doing, I have a couple online programs some I run live and some that are, just digital downloads. And then I have the ebook, and I do private coaching as well. And I have been trained as a coach, and, kind of bringing that into it as well. So it's been, and now I have the podcast also, which I just started in September. So it's been a lot of fun, and I've connected with a lot of amazing people, both who are interested in developing a similar kind of lifestyle, as well as people who are already doing it.
Okay, very good. So blog, podcast, great website. You should go check it out, nomadtopia.com. And then I discovered, I don't think you told us about this, but I found that there's a book out there, and that sure looks like you. Destination Nomadtopia, Discover the Ideal Lifestyle for Your Nomadic Soul. I noticed that it has to do with combining your passion for travel, that is, helping other people combine their passion for travel, with everything else that's important to them. So why don't we talk about your book? What is the point of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. It actually started out, it was just going to be like a free, like an opt-in bonus on my website. And I wanted to do a quiz. And I was going to have all these questions that would kind of, lead people to, what is the ideal lifestyle for you at the end. And I started to map it out, and it was so complicated because there's so many variables, and there's so many pieces of the puzzle, depending on someone's situation, whether they have family or not, whether they like to travel a lot or not, all of these things. I was like, this can't be summed up that easily. What am I going to do with this? And so it basically turned into a book. So it's, and I did it first as a PDF, and then also put it out on Amazon as Kindle. And it's quite simple. It's really just a series of questions to get people thinking about all of these different aspects. From, do you have kids, and what kind of experience do you want them to have, all the way to, do you enjoy travel planning? Because if you don't, maybe you should not move around a lot, things like that. So, and then there's also examples from other people who are doing it and kind of highlighting different aspects of their lives. And just, and then there's some kind of coachy workshop questions at the end to kind of synthesize it all. And like, okay, so what does this mean for you? What do you really want the lifestyle to look like?
So it sounds like the basis of the podcast and the website, the book, and all this stuff is being a nomad, being a digital nomad, right? More specifically, is that right?
Yeah. I think, for some reason, I don't really like the term digital nomad, but it's just kind of
So
easy.
Being a nomad then?
Well, yes, except I also want to, the reason I'm hesitating is because I feel like it's more about, it's almost kind of like expressing like that essence, you have this like feeling, right? Like this wanderlust or whatever, that you really want to be out there and seeing the world. And yet, like, some people don't want to actually be nomads, right? Like, that word may resonate with them in some way. And it has, with me for a long time. I've used the word nomad forever. But people are like, well, but I don't want to sell my house. Can I still be a nomad? I'm like, sure. It's so really for me, the thread is location independence, because I think that's what makes all of the other possibilities available to you.
Having a location independent business.
Right.
Yeah.
Or also I've interviewed some people, who are remote workers. So like they might have a regular job, but they're able to telecommute, work from anywhere. Right. So yeah, I think, and also there are some people who, are in that, like, maybe they do seasonal work and they work their butts off and make a ton of money and then, take 6 months off. Like, as far as I'm concerned, all of that's fair game.
Or passive income.
Or a passive income, exactly. So it's really just a question, or, investments, like whatever. Whatever will allow you that flexibility to make, really, all our decisions have always, the traditional approach is like, all of your decisions are based around work, basically. Like, you have to live in a specific place and do things a certain way because that's where your job is. And once you take that out of the equation, it opens everything up. So that's really what it's all about, I think.
Absolutely. Not just living where you want to live, but living a much better lifestyle in most places. We're talking specifically about people normally that are in, cities in the United States, right? I mean, somebody that has a business here in San Miguel can't necessarily, I don't know, whatever it is, can't necessarily live a better lifestyle if they move to New York, but, the other way around. So, yeah, it's interesting. I was just started reading Vagabonding. Have you read that? That talks a lot about what you're talking about.
Yeah,
here.
that was one of the books I read when I was planning my round-the-world trip.
I can't believe it's taken me so long to read that book, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
I recommend everybody to read that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that it's not for everybody, but yet the word does sort of, strike a chord with some of us. I kind of like the word, but I don't think anybody could look at me and call me a digital nomad. I do have a location independent business, but as you see, I got this kind of big 1,700-pound vocal booth, which made my move to San Miguel here kind of difficult. But I do like the idea of travel. I do have a mobile studio, and I guess the question I have is, what is the right amount of travel for you? Because I listened to the very beginning of your most recent podcast that's out there with a gentleman. I think he's a British gentleman. And he was Leon, yeah. Leon, that's it. And you asked him, what is your life about? And he said, traveling as much as possible, constantly. And that's how a lot of people are. I mean, a lot of my friends are that way. I think James is a lot more that way than I am. I love the idea of traveling, but I don't want to be doing it all year round. I want to have a home base, and then I want to go explore here and there. I like the idea of going away for a few weeks. Maybe at some point I'll want to get away for a month or two or something like that. So what about you? What is the right amount of travel for Amy Scott?
Yeah, it's definitely, kind of has depended on, the phase of my life, I think. These days, I would say I like to stay in one place for anywhere from like 1 to 3 months. And I like having a home base, although we have been going back to Buenos Aires less and less. We were gone for almost a year the last time, and we've already been gone 6 months. And then I also, I like to, around those longer stays, kind of mix it up with some more moving around. We've been more or less staying in one place here in San Miguel for a couple months. And now we're going to, we'll be in Mexico City for almost a week, and then on to Nicaragua. So that's going to be kind of, things are all in uproar for about a week. And then we already have a place to stay. We're staying in Granada for 6 or 7 weeks. And then we'll probably be moving around quite a bit.
Nicaragua?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I keep hearing about Granada, Spain. I thought that's what we were talking about.
Granada,
okay,
Nicaragua.
So why Nicaragua?
It was never on my radar, at least not recently. One of the guidebooks I edited back when I was editing guidebooks was for Nicaragua. And I know the guy who wrote the book. So he's been talking of Nicaragua forever, but it had never really crossed my mind as a place to spend time until this year. And we knew we wanted to stay in Central America. We have to be in the States for a wedding in a couple months. So we didn't want to go too far. We figured we might as well stay in the area, stay in the time zone. more or less. And I just kept, like people on social media and just it kept popping up. And I thought, okay, this is something to check out. And funny thing, talking about Chang Mai, somebody called Grenada the Chang Mai of Central America.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
And then you're going to Costa Rica as well, right?
Yeah, and again, Costa Rica's, even though I know tons of expats and tons of digital nomads who go there, it's never really been on my radar, really been a place that I've felt drawn to. But we have about 3.5 months, and you only get 90 days in Nicaragua. So we were like, well, might as well pop over to Costa Rica for a little bit because it's right there.
I'll tell you, I went, last month to Guatemala.
Yeah.
And I would recommend checking out Antigua. It's really a cool little city. If you like San Miguel, you'll definitely like it there.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Antigua too. Yeah, that might be later this year. Who knows? So yeah, we only know, and that's the other thing. We usually plan, well, I guess it depends. We sometimes don't plan more than a couple months out. This time, because we know we have the wedding, we're kind of booked or have a rough idea what we're doing until like the end of August. And after that, right now, we have no idea. So, it's kind of a balance between like sorting things out a little bit in advance, but then leaving things open because, anything could come up between now and then. So.
I like that too. You know what I've heard a few people talk about that's kind of interesting is in these communities of digital nomads that it's kind of morphing into people that have several home bases. Mm-hmm. So rather than, a perpetual tourist, you're always touring, you just you have, 4 months in this place where you have your friends there and and then 4 months in another place where you also have your friends, maybe the same friends, who knows, or different ones, but it's all kind of people in this whole kind of digital nomad movement, I guess you could call it. So
I think that's a cool way to do things too. Mm-hmm. And I think, some of it starts to happen naturally. Like my brother is in Portland, Oregon, that he's the one getting married. So we've spent, at least I'd say we've probably spent at least 4 months in Portland over the last couple of years. So that feels like kind of a base in a way in the States. And you do start crossing paths with the same people. And there's some it's funny because a friend and I had this idea like 15 years ago. We never did it. I've seen some things popping up that are actually like networks that are facilitating this. So I can't remember. I've seen one or two of them. I can't remember what any of the names are, where it's like you're like a member and they have like a compound or a house or whatever in a couple different places around the world. And then as a member, you can go stay in each of their places. Yeah. Huh. And it's like totally built for this kind of lifestyle. So, like, of course, the internet's really good and,
It's like a co-working space or something.
And co-living is kind of what they're bringing into it, too. So it's like co-living, co-working in one. It's like, oh, we've got a place in Bali. You can go there. And then we've got a place in Santiago. You can go there. And
I think that's really interesting. And I see a lot of these co-working spaces, and that sounds like something like that, or co-living. And I don't know. I've never done anything like that, but I think it might be cool. But what I think is interesting is that a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is very much on kind of individualism and doing what you want to do and all this kind of. But that sounds almost like communal, you know. So like you're going to these places because you want to do it, find your passion, all that stuff. But then you're staying have this kind of commune thing. Not that it might be cool. It might be fun. I mean, you definitely do need to have. People that are, understand you and like-minded and stuff in the places that you're going to enjoy yourself. We're social beings, so that's important as well. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, that comes up a lot in the people I interview for my podcast is, wanting to, feeling a lack of community and realizing, wait, this is important to me and how can I get that? And so this kind of thing, it makes sense that, this kind of the ideas around this lifestyle start to evolve over time. Mm-hmm. People are like, I could do whatever I want. And they take off and they're like, I'm all by myself. Maybe I should, find some other people. So it's kind of the best of both worlds that way.
Yeah. I've found myself, in different places, different times in my life where, I'll be living in some awesome place, have an awesome house. Everything's cool, but, I'll just spend a lot of time by myself, and I'm kind of like, oh, this sucks,
Well, so, it's like anything else in life, the idea of it. This is one of the things that it seems like I had to keep reinforcing with my daughter, who's, 27 now. She gets it, but that whole thing about it isn't the destination, it's the journey. It's really true. And this idea we have about this, we're going to get to this thing and then it's going to be perfect. Well, yeah, once in a while that happens, but usually it does not. And so our best ideas and our best intentions, we have to keep monitoring them along the way and making sure we are doing what we want to do, right?
Totally. And I think it can be really easy to get, people can get so like militant about the lifestyle, and then it's like, oh God, I'm such a sellout if I like stop traveling or if I buy a house
right.
And forget it. Like you've got to do what feels right for you. And yeah, I think it's important to kind of make sure you take that time to kind of check in. Like, am I still happy doing this? And if I'm not, that's totally fine.
Right. Well, I agree with that entirely. Amy Scott of Nomadtopia. She has a website. She has a blog. She has a podcast, and she has a book entitled Destination Nomadtopia, Discover the Ideal Lifestyle for Your Nomadic Soul. I bet you've interviewed and met some very interesting people in the last, probably for a long time, but certainly since you've been doing the podcast, right? Because you have to search for people like, to have as interviewees. So who are some of the interesting people that you've met?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think, first I just want to say that, some of the inspiration for this lifestyle even came from people that I met while I was traveling. There's one person, and I think I talked about her in my book too, a woman I met from England who met her on a boat in Thailand. And I was like, what are you doing here? And she said she had a couple years earlier sworn she would never spend another winter in London. And here she is on her way to an island in Thailand. And meeting people like that, I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's a way you could tweak all of this. And so I think that's one of the reasons it's so great to just get out there, because you do start meeting people who are doing all these different things. And so with the podcast, I think part of the idea was, to bring that to the people who aren't traveling yet. And I've interviewed so many interesting people. I'm really trying to go for, a breadth of experience. So I've interviewed like Greg Denning. He and his wife Rachel have 6 kids, I think, and have been traveling overland for years. I'm always like, if you say you have kids and so you can't do this, like pay attention to people like the Dennings who are, just really rocking it. And then I've interviewed, people with pets, because again, sometimes people are like, I have a pet, I can't do it. Let's see, some people who are remote workers, as well as a lot of people who have their own businesses, some people who are pretty, stationary at this point. They found a place that they like, and then other people who are like constantly on the move. So I really just want to show that, like anything goes. You can create whatever lifestyle is a good fit for you. And hopefully hearing all these stories will give you some ideas.
Okay. Yeah. And so that was, what was his name? Denning?
Greg Denning.
Okay. And so you say you've been looking for a breadth of experience. So a variety of different types of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. And so anybody else that you want to throw out to us? Who else have you had some interesting stories?
Let's see. Well, this guy, Leon, who you mentioned, Leon Logothetis, who I interviewed last week, he found me. I don't know how. And I was like, yeah, you sound cool. Let's talk. And he's done some really interesting things by, he creates kind of these big missions. Not mission like missionary, but mission like adventures. Like he drove a vintage motorbike around the world. He traveled across the U.S. on $5 a day. And then he also has brought philanthropy into some of his trips as well. He did some road rally, and for every mile he drove, or was that the bike one? There's so many different things he did, but for every mile he drove, a book was donated to some organization or something like that. So it's, listening to, those kinds of ideas, it can really get your gears turning ooh, what could I do? That's interesting. Yeah.
That sounds great. I'm curious to know, are there any specific books, maybe courses or something like that for someone that, wants to do what you did, whether it's being a nomad or even maybe some of the publishing stuff? What are some of the resources you recommend?
Yeah. Well, the one you mentioned, Vagabonding by Rolf Potts, is awesome. And that's really good. It's funny. It's been forever since I read it, but it's kind of like, just kind of gets you thinking about it in a different way, right? It's kind of a mindset thing. What else? Well, I can recommend my own stuff. I have an online course, which I actually just finished running recently, Create Your Nomadtopia. I do that usually a couple times a year. And I have one called the Work From Anywhere Test Drive. So it's like, if you could, in theory, take your work anywhere, but you're not quite sure how to do it, that kind of walks you through the steps to do a test drive. I feel like there are other books that Natalie Sisson, Suitcase Entrepreneur, has a book that covers a huge breadth of all of this stuff too. I haven't covered any of that in a book, but a lot of my blog posts are, about logistical stuff, like, dealing with time zones. Like when I was in Asia and coaching clients in the US, like how do you all figure that out? And so there's a lot of logistical stuff to figure out, and I like helping people with that stuff.
Very cool. So, You have a test drive. I think that's fascinating because, what you run into a lot is people, I mean, when I was leaving the U.S. a year ago, I had people coming out of the woodwork with this far off look in their eyes like, you're doing what we all want to do, but we can't do it. And so many of the reasons, maybe some of them really can't do it, but probably plenty of them can. So how is it that you can actually put somebody on a test drive to decide whether they can do this with their work?
Yeah. So it's really set up either for people who are already working for themselves or who have a flexible enough situation that they can ask their boss if they can telecommute for a week or something like that just to try it out. And I know people who've kind of put those feelers out there and it ends up leading to a fully remote job doing the same thing they were doing before. So as long as you're in that situation, I help people kind of prep before they go. So deciding where to go for a test drive, maybe you live in California, you could go to, you can go to New York for your test drive. Or if you want to branch out, you can go to Egypt for your test drive, right? How much of a test do you want it to be? And I have a whole guide on internet troubleshooting and also how are you going to what do you need to take with you? If you're used to having, your file cabinets and stuff, what are you actually going to need with you? And just, helping people think through everything they probably haven't thought of. And then I actually have a series of challenges that I have them do while they're on the test drive to kind of, it's kind of condensing into a short period of time all the things that, not all of them, but a lot of the things that could happen over months abroad. So let's, kind of create this experience where you're banging it all out in a week and see how it goes. And then look at, afterwards. Did it go well? What do you need to do differently? How can you set it up better for next time?
Great. So, do we want to ask the question, James, or do you have something else for Amy Scott?
For somebody that is just starting out on this type of thing, what's the best piece of advice that you would give them?
It's funny. I ask people this on my podcast too, and the first thing that came to mind is the same thing that everyone else says, which is just do it. Just do it. All the time. And of course, I know it's so much easier to say in hindsight. Right. And Jonathan, what you were just describing about, the people who are like, oh, that's what I always wanted to do. That's a big part of why I started Nomadtopia, is because I've gotten that too for years. And it's if you really want to do it, you can probably do it. And I want to show you how, And so I think that's part of it too. So, the easy way or, the simple answer is just do it. The less simple answer is just figure out what you really need in place to make it possible and start taking the steps. Yeah.
All the information is out there today, all the communication technology and all the stuff we need. So, to put it in another way, it's your own willpower. That's the only thing that's keeping you from living the life that you want to live. So, if you want to do it, then just dedicate time and find out exactly what you want to do and just do it. Exactly.
Yeah. I think I've said it before. It's kind of like, I don't want to push people to leave the U.S. or whatever if they don't want to.
Exactly.
What is a little bit sad, I guess, is just knowing that some people want to really bad and they just never put one foot in front of the other to figure out how to do it.
Right.
And that is where Nomadtopia can help. Again, we've been talking with Amy Scott, Nomadtopia.com. She is somebody who can help you with these things if you have an interest in this. And she's headed back to Buenos Aires, Argentina after, what, a few months?
Actually, we have no plan to
Oh, you're
go
not?
back
I'm sorry.
right now.
You're going to Nicaragua.
Yeah, we're going to Nicaragua.
But you still consider it your home base, was what you said.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Still my home base. My husband's family is there. We have an apartment there. So I'm sure we'll go back at some point, but we don't know when.
Very good. And so you've been a big help to us. We have quite a sharing, I think, between our audience and yours. And so for those of you who are indeed interested in having a location-independent business, those of you who are interested in getting past your borders, she can maybe help you get a little test drive. Thank you very much, Amy Scott, for being on the Borderless Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also, for those that find what she's saying interesting, you offer a free, a free 14-day course when they I'm not sure. Well, anyways, I'm going to put a link on my website. What can you explain a little bit about
the Freedom Kickstart is a 14-day email course. It's free. Just opt in on my website, and you'll get all of those emails to kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah. Okay, thanks again, Amy Scott.
Thank you.
So, James, how did you find Amy Scott anyway?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, funny enough, one of the first guests, Claudia Moncars, I was talking to her on a phone call, and she said, "Oh, there's somebody in town that you should meet." And that was probably a year ago or something.
I see. Gotcha. Well, anyway, I was surprised. He told me there's somebody who's doing a podcast, and she lives right here in San Miguel de Allende, or she's staying here for right now. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So we checked out her site, and she does a podcast. I'm like, this is crazy. So at some point we had to get her on.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did.
People coming here.
And then I put you in touch, or I put Valen Dawson in touch with you, or one of those ways or something like that. She's also a great sort of nomad who's traveled this, and she's really, she posts a lot of stuff.
Oh,
she's got a lot of stuff going on. Interesting character. We had her on the podcast a month or so ago.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, this will bring an end to the Borderless Podcast today, but there is an opportunity. Get involved in the conversation, as we say. Please go to borderlesspodcast.com, click on the Join Now button. And what happens when they do that, James?
Yeah, they get that. They get a free ebook as well as a link to the private Facebook group. And you can come meet other people that are also living a borderless lifestyle like Amy Scott and ourselves. So,
very good. Another Borderless Podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast. Traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.